So we've just navigated the coldest night of the season by far. I suspect we're in the mid to high teens hereabouts, which is many degrees lower than the survival threshold really for most of the plants that we are raising in this greenhouse. But all the plants came through inside the greenhouse just fine. Very well indeed. An interesting twist to the typical narrative is that I would typically expect to see plants actually freeze solid in heavy weather, even in the protection of the greenhouse. It can still get very cold inside these greenhouses, and the floating row cover makes a very positive difference in terms of giving us some extra protection, as does the greenhouse itself, and so on and so forth. But what I was able to do this time that I haven't really done before was to get you can see this heater and bring that into the mix. Now, why that's important is not simply because it allowed us to keep the temperature inside this greenhouse at a moderate level. It also allowed us to keep the temperature at a level where none of the plants froze. As I was saying, it's not untypical to expect the plants to freeze inside a greenhouse going through a cold stretch and then thaw out, maybe freeze again the next night, and then potentially thaw out, maybe freeze again the next night, and so on and so forth. It's can really knock the stuffing out of plants, that repeated pattern of freezing. There's a lot we can do to soften the trend, but it's not something we really would prefer. One of the fascinating things about having this heater included in the mix this last few days, I've been experimenting intensely with it and working with it and getting into and out of the greenhouse at all hours of the day and night to see what sort of approach would work best. But what I did find was that it took a relatively modest amount of propane to essentially keep this greenhouse at a very comfortable threshold, to the point where no plants at all froze. What that means is that we can get into the greenhouse and harvest it. One can't really harvest frozen plants. They tend to mush as soon as you harvest them. So one interesting aspect of this technique of stopping plants in the greenhouse from actually freezing is that it means that the greenhouse is fully freed up to harvest from, where in certain instances it can shut down for a few days because the plants simply remain frozen. So an interesting little twist to the greenhouse management turn. I'm really delighted with this experience of using this heater. It's made an enormous positive difference in a very small way, and I think also a testament to the fact that this greenhouse, which is essentially quite low, homemade, homestead level greenhouse, are in some respects easier to heat and easier to protect than the larger commercially built ones. And I think this is a classic example of having a solid little heater in a greenhouse this size. It's made all the difference in the world.